This morning, we're going to look at a lesson, The Local Church and I. The preacher was typing, and he looked down and he said, the church was untied? You see, what he had meant to type was the church was united. Well, you realize the difference there is the placement of the I. And that's really true. If the church becomes untied, or rather it's united, has much to do with I, with you, with us as individuals. This morning, looking at the church, we realize that the Bible uses the church in at least two senses. One is the universal sense, such as we find in Matthew 16:18, upon this rock I will build my church. But then we would also see the church spoken of in the local sense, like the church of God, which is at Corinth. And in that particular instance, it would be talking about that church in that one specific place, those Christians there. Well, today we're considering the church in the local sense as we discuss the local church and I. Abraham Lincoln said, I like to see a man proud of the place in which he is living, and I like to see a man live so that his place will be proud of him. Now, I know sometimes people say, wait. You got to watch out for pride. Well, the haughty arrogance that is sometimes pride, the Bible condemns. But the idea of satisfaction and happiness, as we sometimes use that word, I think is good and proper. Well, if we were to take the sentiments of Abraham Lincoln and apply them then to the church, we might say, we'd like to see a member proud of the local congregation of which he is a member. And also we'd like to see that member live so that the local church can be proud of him. And that's how it ought to be. I'd like to ask you real quick, are you jealous of the local church? And we might take a step back there and say, wait, what do you mean jealous? But realize that Paul spoke of these terms. 2 Corinthians 11 verse 2, for I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. There was this protectiveness, if you would, that Paul had toward the church of the Lord. And I just put it this way, I would hope every one of us would have this same kind of attitude for the church of the Lord here at Eastern Meadows. I then also ask, do you have anxiety for the local church? And sometimes we might take a step back there and say, wait, anxiety? No, God doesn't want us to be anxious. But interestingly, in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 28, you read, and this is after Paul has discussed many things that he has suffered. And then he says this, verse 28, and apart from other things, there is a daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. Now, I find it interesting when I see a word and then look at various translations, and they translate that word differently. And in this case, the American Standard Version and English Standard Version translates this word anxiety. The King James Version says the word care. The New American Standard Version says concern. And the New King James says deep concern. So care, concern, deep concern, and anxiety. But in other words, Paul is saying, man, I'm just caught up with care and concern, even the word anxiety used, for the church. And so it is. Do we have this same protectiveness, the same concern for the local church like Paul had for the church of our Lord? The local church provides me with all the blessings associated with membership in the Lord's church. Now, we might speak of the church universal, but these benefits it comes from that local congregation. First, the bond of fellowship. You read of this fellowship in Acts 2, 42 through 47. And the blessing that we have fellowship one with another in 1 John chapter 1, verse 7. And I hope that you've experienced it and appreciated. When I was a child growing up, we attended the Cottondale Church of Christ. We were there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, every service of a gospel meeting revival or a vacation Bible school. If there was a door knocking or there were any other kind of event, we were there. If it was a matter of when I was a small child, members signing up to clean the building for a week or for a month, well, my parents' name were on that list, and so we were kids who went along and helped do that cleaning. We were involved in every fashion. Those people at that church came to, and I realized it, means so very much to my parents and to us as children. This bond of fellowship was incredible, and I, as a child, recognized it. Yes, I had a grandmother and a grandfather, and we had extended family, but we saw our church family more than we saw our extended family. There was a special bond with blood kin, but there was a very, very, very special bond, shall we say this, with Jesus' blood's kin. The bond of fellowship. And it's the local church that gives it. The strength of edification. If we'd say, what do we learn? Oh, how blessed we are to be made strengthened in the Christian faith with what we learn in the local church. The joy of public worship. The time that we can come and we sang some great songs. You sang out. Wonderful singing service this morning. The time to remember Jesus with the bread, the fruit of the vine, to give of our means. And then to pray and to consider, appreciate the prayer that Mike prayed. This happens in the local church. The balm of comfort. When those times come, they're hard, difficult. Friends help. Well, once again, what I experienced, what I saw, and what I have observed in my lifetime, the greatest comfort came from my Christian brothers and sisters. Encouragement. You ever get depressed, down? We all do. And once again, encouragement. All these things, benefits from the local church. Well, the local church not only provides benefits, but I realize that every member is important. The church is likened unto a body. In Colossians 1:18, it says, and he is the head of the body, comma, the church. Now, for those of you who appreciate English, after that comma, with the words the church, that's an appositive. It's just renaming that word before the comma, body. The body is the church is the body. And you get to Ephesians 1:22 and 23, he says the church, which is his body. And so sometimes we say church, sometimes we say body. This metaphor that Paul uses, friends, it just kind of opens up really what the church is. One of my favorite passages, we don't have the time now to just take and read it. In the past, we've taken the time, just studied through it. But 1 Corinthians 12 through 31, where he at length discusses the idea of the church as a body. And you know what you have to walk away with when you read that? Every member of the Lord's church is important. The local church and every member of the local church is important. Now, some of the members of our body get little attention. Some are very important. You know, your hair, did it get some attention? Your face, did it get some attention? But I have an idea that your thumbs, your big toe, didn't get a lot of attention this morning. Not like your hair did, not like your face did. But yet the reality is, that big thumb, it's important. That big toe, it's important. Can you imagine not having your thumb, but yet you had to grip tightly? How difficult that might be. Or maybe as you walk or as you run, how that you have to learn to rebalance yourself, not having your big toe. Every member of our physical body is important. Every member of the spiritual body, the church, is important. In Ephesians 4, verses 15 and 16, you read, "But speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things unto Him who is the head, Christ. For from Him the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which," now look at this, "every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love." You know, this is kind of working down to growth of the body. But while it acknowledges the whole body, it then also points out every part does its share. So again, every member is important. Look at Romans 12, beginning of verse 4. "For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function. So we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individually members one of another. Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, in proportion of our faith." You know, in this passage, once again, you got to walk away with, well, here's the whole church, many members, but each member has its own function. So once again, you walk away with, every member is important. Notice the emphasis that's placed on the worth, the power of each member. 1 Corinthians 16, verse 2. Now this is the context of giving. And he says, on the first day of the week, each of you is to put something aside and store it up as he may prosper, so that there be no collecting when I come. There, the emphasis, each of you, every member is important. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 19, "But God's firm foundation stands, bearing the seal. The Lord knows those who are His, and let everyone who names the name of the Lord depart from iniquity." Let everyone. Now here it's talking about, ultimately, you might say, godly living. It's important that every member live godly. Every member is important. You're a member of the Lord's church. You're important. You might say, but I haven't been a Christian very long. You're important. I'm young. I'm still junior high school. I'm still in high school. You're important. I've had a long life. I've been blessed. And I've been active as a member of the Lord's church. But now I'm older and I'm frailer. Physically and to a degree mentally. Still, you are important. Every member of the local church is important. When I was a kid, I'd go down to my grandmother's for a week in the summer, sometimes a week spring break, sometimes maybe even 2 weeks in the summer. Lived in Greene County, Alabama, and kind of, you might say, the middle of nowhere. And it's more the middle of nowhere now than it was even then. So many that did live there moved away. There's a lot of pine trees and a lot of deer there now. What used to be fields where people would plow or graze cows, now pine trees are growing. But I'd go down there, I'd fly kites. But you see, I've never flown, I don't know that I've ever flown a bought kite. There were some weeds in the back of my grandmother's kind of house beyond the garden spot. And I don't know what kind of weeds they were, but they would grow up tall. And they would be hollow, but they would be brittle and stiff enough that I could cut those things, and they were good sticks for kites. And I had some string. I'd kind of string those sticks into a cross. And then I would run my string around the edge to outline my kite. But I'd have to take a piece of newspaper. Newspaper then was a little bigger than it is now. But I'd spread it out because that newspaper was my kite. I'd cut the sticks to fit the newspaper. Then I would take some flour paste. Take flour and water and mix together. It's a good paste, a glue. And I'd run it along that string. I'd fold it over. And my grandmother would give me some kind of old rags that I'd make my kite. Because I tell you what, without that tail, you couldn't fly that kite. It'd be all this way. Well, that tail, it'd stay steady. And that's how I flew my kites. Just had to take some string with me and I could build my kite, fly my kite. But I'll tell you something. I couldn't have done it without the string. I couldn't have done it without sticks. I couldn't have done it without that flour paste. I couldn't have done it without that tail. Every piece that went into that kite was important, or I couldn't fly that kite. In a local church, once again, every member is important, doing its part. The house was built, and it was magnificent. People came from far and wide to see that house, and they would marvel at the beauty of the windows and how open it was. Or they would remark at the magnificent doors, or the roof lines, or the turrets, the staircase. And there was a little nail held on a shingle of the roof. It overheard all of those conversations, but nobody ever spoke of the nail. Oh, they spoke of other pieces of the house and its grandeur, how beautiful it was, magnificent, important. Nobody ever spoke of the nail. And that little old nail began to feel like, well, I'm of no use. I don't matter. Nobody cares about me. Nobody can even see me. I'll just pull away. And over the next few days, it began to inch its way and edge its way, and it finally just popped loose. And it rolled down the side of that roof, dropped off the edge of that roof into the soil below. And then a long rain came. But you see, the owners of the house, they had just closed it up and they had gone on a vacation. And then a long rain came. And it found that spot where that nail had popped loose. Water began to drip. And water began to drip. And it dripped some more. And then those beautiful walls and some of that beautiful, expensive wallpaper and the magnificent furnishings and the floors began to get wet, came to be soaked, and then came to have the damage done. All because the one little nail thought, nobody recognizes me. I'm not important. and he quit doing his job. We've got to remember, in the Lord's church, every member of the Lord's church is important. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do. That should be the way we live. I'm just one. I can't do everything. I can do something. Just because I can't do everything doesn't mean I'm not going to do that something. I'm going to do what I can do. You know, you and I, we do owe something to the local church. You know, like we owe things to our family or to our country or maybe other organizations we belong to. And yes, to the church of the Lord of which we are a member. And why do we owe? Well, just one reason, because we belong. You know, like you're in a physical family. You know, a lot of families, each person has their chores. And why? Because they're a part of that household. And it's only right. They do their part. You know, because we belong. And because we've received. We talked about all the blessings we have from the local church. Well, realize we have blessings from our family, our nation. We owe. What are some of the things, and we're not going to finish, in actually about 3 or 4 weeks from today, we're going to finish this lesson. But some of the things we owe is, one, we owe our presence. You know, you are present today, literally. In Hebrews 10:25, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. You know, that passage says, yeah, we ought to be there. Well, I'm looking at the clock realizing I can't finish, and how much now do I say? Years ago, I was preaching in Mississippi. It was a church kind of just across the line in Alabama. And the preacher there, and the congregation number-wise wasn't as large as we are, but he said, our members love to camp. That was a time a lot of people were buying campers and just going on the weekends or the vacations in the summers. And he says, during the summer, he says, any weekend, any Sunday, we're going to have 10 to 12 families off somewhere camping. He says, now, they're faithful to the Lord and they're going to be in worship. But he says, they're not in the local church. He says, they don't understand how that the local church needs them. You know, we all understand we're going to be out of town some. We're going to take a vacation or two, and some 3 and some 4 maybe, but our presence is needed. I know this. I'm glad we don't have 10 to 12 families every Sunday off camping. Yes, the local church needs a presence. It needs the presence of our children. It needs our support. There are times that there's programs, activities, sometimes it may be even targeted for an age group, that are needed. There really are. But yet, through lack of participation, they die. They're no longer there, not a part of that congregation. Maybe some thought, well, I don't need that. But some did. But it died because we didn't participate. We weren't present. Needs our presence. Maybe you've had a CD at a bank. I promise you this, you didn't get any interest off that CD if you didn't have something deposited. You've heard people say sometimes, if you're going to get something out of it, you got to put something in it. That's the local church. That's the assembly. We come, we put something into it. We put our minds, our hearts, our voices. The local church needs my presence. The local church, it needs my desire. And we're going to just let this be part of the part 2 when we get there, about 3 to 4 weeks from now. But I would promise you, just remember, if you leave here, if you can't remember anything else, remember the local church and I, that I am important in the Lord's church. The Lord's church needs me. The local church, Eastern Meadows, needs me. And I hope we have the attitude, I want to give and do whatever I can of me, my time, my talents, my energy, to the Lord and to His church, and do a very specific way at the local church that I'm a part of. As we close, we realize that we've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God. I am so thankful for God's grace. Without His grace and mercy, there would be no salvation. Because of that grace, mercy, God's love, there's the cross, there's Jesus, there's the blood that was shed, and there can be forgiveness. We respond to that grace and accept it on God's terms. Hence, we, with faith, we turn from our sin. That's repentance. Confess that faith and then are immersed, baptized for the forgiveness of sins. And I would beg of you, if you've not done that this morning, now is a good time to do it. If you've wandered away, now's the time to come back, confess that sin, and we can pray. If there's other need for prayer, we'd be glad to take that time and pray for you. If you need to come this morning, please come as we stand and sing.